Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Torey and today we are making a holiday card or Christmas card. And the first about 3 minutes of this video is me just messing this project up. I tried to do this card front several times, 2 times to be exact. And I don't know if it's just my ink or what, but it was not working out for me the way that I wanted it to. I ultimately just start over and just completely rethink how I wanted to go about this project, and will end up coloring the designs with my Ohuhu alcohol markers. But when I started this, I really wanted to ink blend everything together because I do love ink blending, but for some reason, the black ink that I was using just wouldn't set. I have no idea what was going on or why it wouldn't. I used my heat tool to try and get it to set. I waited for ages at one point. I think the second part or the second cover that, or the second panel that I tried to make, I waited for ages. I turned my camera off, walked away, cleaned all my stencils, did all this stuff, and when I came back it was still bleeding everywhere. So I ultimately was just like, you know what, I'm going to stop torturing myself and losing my sanity over this card front and just try and go about this in a different way. So on camera here on the video, I am going about trying to do it for the second time. This time I only did my stamping just one time, and I figured that I could do a second stamp over that to make the lines a little bit darker and clearer. But I figured if I only stamped one time and then used my heat tool on top of that and gave it some time to dry, I wouldn't have to worry about the black lines running. But they still did. You can see on those pink presents there that they are not supposed to be that color. They're supposed to be a much lighter of a pink than what they're showing up as on camera, and it just wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. So I will go all the way through this one again before I decide that I'm not gonna do it this way. I actually was just going to use this and just kind of accept the kind of darker pink around some certain parts of it, but I forgot to re-stamp it to actually make my lines solid, and I cut them out with the very not good punch of ink that I put on there for the very first time. So this is where I realized that I messed that up again, and then we will kind of just jump right into the actual process video. So what I did here was completely change my ink. First and foremost, I pulled out my intense black from Close to My Heart. The ink that I was using before the black ink was Detail Black from Pinkfresh Studio. And I figured maybe if I just change my ink, I'll just have an easier of a time overall. And I don't know why I didn't think to do that on my second panel, just try a different ink, but that's neither here nor there. We're already past this, it's already over. So I'm using my intense black from Close to My Heart. And what I'm going to do is stamp this several times so that I've got a solid impression, or as solid of an impression as I can get, because I want to be done doing this, since this is the third time I've done this at this point. Hence the reason I didn't reset up and just restart my video all over again and just not basically show you that I messed up this card front so many times. I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna start right here and just leave all of these mess ups at the beginning. So I will also pull back out the little envelope die that I was going to be using, and I'm actually going to add my ink blending details to this using that Pinkfresh Studio ink stencil and the die cut that I had originally planned to use for all of this. I'm still going to go with the same type of design. I'm just not going to be doing the ink blending over the stencils to get everything colored. So I'm adding the details to my little envelope, and then I will move on to kind of laying out all of my markers that I want to use and getting everything set up. I figured I would do this and give my ink, my black intense ink, a little bit of time to dry before I started coloring everything. And then you can see I'm pulling everything out to kind of show you how it should look. So all of these presents and the little bit of greenery that are in that stamp set will kind of tuck into this envelope, and it will kind of look like an envelope full of presents and greenery, which is super cute. So I pull out a few alcohol markers. I have a couple of these from Michaels, the Artist's Loft brand, and I have, let's see, blush, tea green, and warm gray 1, and then I have the coral pink from Ohuhu. I did ask for the pastel Ohuhu markers for Christmas because I really like the markers themselves, but they're so dark. And I wanted a much more muted, or I guess pastel version of them. And I did see that they had a set of those, so I asked for those for Christmas. So hopefully I get them, fingers crossed. But I'm just going to start getting everything colored in. I'm going to use that green on my leaves, and then I'm going to color my presents red and pink. Some of them I will color just the ribbon red and then the present boxes pink, or I will do the present boxes red and the ribbon pink. I'm just going to kind of alternate randomly. I didn't really choose anything specifically for how I decided to color which one. There are a couple of spots on here where I did have a little bit of bleeding from my ink, and I'm guessing those places I just had it a little bit more inked up on those lines, but it's not nearly as noticeable as it was with the ink blending, and most of that I was able to tuck behind other presents, so you can't even see it on my card. And then I'm going back over the greens to kind of add a little bit of deeper green into my center of the leaves, so it has a little bit of shading, and I do think that worked out really well. Giving it some time to fully dry before I go back in and add another layer of that same color on top. It did give me a little bit of gradation and a little bit of definition to those leaves. So I will take that over to my die cut machine and get that cut out. I'm just popping all of the presents and the greenery and everything out here. And then I think I'm going to move right along to, do I dry fit my? Yes, I'm going to dry fit all of my presents in here and see if I'm liking how this looks with the colors that I chose and all that. Now, this is a lot bolder than I had originally planned for it to be because I was going to be doing ink blending. So that part kind of took me a minute to get used to, but then I also remember that the person that I'm planning to send this card to likes things a lot more colorful than I do. So while this might be a little bit bold for my tastes, the person that I'm going to send this to, I think is going to absolutely love it. I'm using the 2022 embossing folder of the month. I think it was October from Spellbinders. This one I got on sale like several months ago during one of their clearance sales, and I'm just going to emboss the card front that I'm going to be using to place everything on and kind of dry fit my envelope on there. Then I'm going to trim that down to be 4 inches by 5 1/4 so that I have a little bit of a border around this textured paper. And then I'm going to pull a little bit of ink and add some ink blending just in the middle around where my little envelope will rest. And the reason I did this is because I felt like it brought out some of the texture and design from that embossing folder while not fully coloring the whole piece of paper, if that makes sense. Since I was ink blending on that textured paper, I just ink blended really, really lightly on it. So none of the ink really goes into anything that's below the higher embossed portions of it. So I think it looks really good like that. And I'm glad that I did it because it added a little bit of interest to the background. I'm going to start my adhering and taping by just putting some tape here on my envelope. And then I believe I will stick that right down and start tucking my presents inside of it. In hindsight, I kind of wish I had used the press and seal method when I first dry fit all of my presents into this envelope, because as I'm rewatching this video, I liked that layout the most compared to the two that I end up doing. So I did the first dry fit, and then I'll do another little dry fit situation before I finally adhere everything down. And the very first one I did was my favorite of the three of them. I also bought some 1/4 inch score tape, and that's been super helpful. So I'm really glad I got that. So that's what I'm using to get this envelope adhered down to my paper. And then I'm just using this paper piercer and pickup tool from Simon Says Stamp to pull off any of the liners on that score tape. Now, when I stuck this down, it was quite tight at first, so that's why I kind of just started sticking those presents in. I figured it would be a little bit easier to get in and under that little envelope line. And I realized as I was watching the playback of this that the reason that I liked that first layout much more than the remaining two is that I stuck this center present in first, when in reality I probably should have tucked that one in last so that it was sitting on top of all of the other presents. I ended up tucking some presents in front of it, and just to the eye, I think it looks a little bit weird, and so I'll keep that in mind for next time. But in the end, I love this card. I do love the way that it came out, even though it definitely took a couple bits of my sanity in the process of making it. That little black leaf sprig piece right there that I stuck behind that present to the left, I don't actually tape that down until the end. I forget all about it, and then have to tuck that underneath everything, because as I pick up my envelope, it's just gonna fall out and I'm gonna be like, oh, I never taped that down. Whoops. One thing that I'm doing when I'm taping these presents down is I have these teeny tiny little foam squares from Simon Says Stamp. I am putting 1 to 2 of those foam squares on the top of my presents, while also placing just some tape runner on the very bottom of the presents. So what that will do is give me a little bit of dimension without having each and every piece popped up on top of each other. So it's going to have the bottom of each present flat against the page, but then just pop up the tops of those ever so slightly to give me like the tiniest little shadow and depth to each present. And I super love the way that that turned out. I was very happy with how that worked out for each of the presents, especially because I did it for probably almost every single present. I did add a couple of them without anything and just was able to rest them on top of each other, like the 2 that I just did. But for most of the other ones, I do add a little piece of that foam tape and then use just my tape runner to kind of get everything adhered down. And then I'm just going to kind of work on getting everything, you know, placed in and laid out to kind of finish this card up, really kind of get everything where it needs to go. One thing I will say that I noticed about this stamp set is that it feels like all of the leaves are going the exact same way. And I could be making that up. It could not be doing that. But I like with leaves and stamp sets and stuff like that, I like when they alternate so that I have kind of an arch to go on each side, if that makes sense. But I felt like I was lacking here, and if I had a little bit more patience when I was putting this together than I had by the time I got to this point, I probably would have cut out and stamped more of the leaves just so that I would have more variation and directional leaves. That way I could place them all over. I do have 2 presents that I did not place inside the actual envelope, and I'm going to place those on the very bottom of my card With the candy cane, I'm going to use that candy cane, but I'm not going to place that candy cane down until I have my sentiment stamped and die cut out. But I will use that as a little bit of a embellishment type situation next to my sentiment. I was looking for another of these kind of just lined leaves and couldn't find one that I liked that I had, already stamped. So what I ended up doing was just chopping off the bottom of that because I felt like it was a little bit too big, and then just tucking that behind some of the other presents and sprigs. And then this is where I am going to decide on what my sentiment will be for this card. I pull out the stamp set, and first I'm going to put away the presents and everything that I had already used, and then I'll decide on what I want to do. And I really like the clear stamps because I can kind of hover them over things and see if I like the way that that's going to look there. And I decide to use, I think it says wishing you a joyful holiday or joyful season. I don't remember what it says. I think it says wishing you a joyous holiday season. I don't know. Once I stamp it, I'll tell you what it says. But I'm also going to use my scraps from cutting out that envelope because this sentiment will fit perfectly inside there, and there's enough room for me to be able to cut it out with my die. So I thought that was perfect, and I didn't have to, waste any paper. So it says wishing you a joyful holiday season. So I was close. So I'll stamp this, I think, a total of 3 times, and I do use the Pinkfresh Studio Detail Black for this, and I'm not ink blending or anything over that, so it'll be fine. And then I'm going to die cut this and just like random white paper out, I think 3 times. I think I do 3 additional cuts of the die with no stamp on it, and that's the first one that I'm going to be doing here. Just so that I can layer those on top of each other and glue them together and give my sentiment just a little bit of dimension and stability when it comes to actually placing it on my card. The final one that I will do here is just going to be the final sentiment, and then I will work on getting everything glued together. With my sentiment done, I am going to place that kind of dry on my card. I'll also move it around a little bit to see if I really like where I had originally planned to place it. And I'm just going to go with what I originally had thought of anyways, which is going to be down here in this right-hand corner of my envelope. I also use my score tape, and I'm going to add 3 pieces of this tape on top of each other and peel off each layer of that. Another in hindsight situation, I probably should have just cut a spare piece of cardstock. It would have worked out a little bit better, I think, and been a lot quicker of a thing for me to do, because the reason I was doing this is that I'd been planning on having my sentiment kind of overlap my actual envelope and the background embossed paper. So since it was going to be hanging over that edge, and that, that's another layer of paper there, I wanted it to be the same height or the same like depth or dimension or whatever. So if I had just taken a piece of scrap cardstock, it would have just bumped that right up, but instead I just used 3 pieces of my score tape. It works out either way, and this is my finished card. Let me know down in the comments below what your thoughts were. I am going to get this, adhered to a card base. These are just pre-cut and scored card bases from Close to My Heart that I've got in like card making kits. So I'm still, working through using those. And anytime I make a card, I just pull one of those out and get my cards adhered to the back of those until I am out. And then I will start likely making my own card bases. So like I said, there's that leaf that I had never adhered down, and I'm getting that stuck in there. And then I will remove the backing to this score tape and get my card stuck down to my card base. And that is it. That's all I have for you today. This is my finished card. I'm going to be sending this to one of my friends, and I'm so excited. I hope she loves it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.